I still remember the first time I saw her, because it wasn't one of those movie moments. There was no slow-motion hair flip, no orchestra swelling in the background. Just a tired girl on a cracked bench at a train station, holding a sandwich that looked too big for her hands and too small to share. But she shared it anyway. I was broke, starving, and late for the night train. My stomach was eating itself. My pride was chewing at me even harder. And then, out of nowhere, this stranger tore her sandwich clean in half and held it out to me without a word. Her eyes said, "Don't argue." And maybe it was the quiet authority in her gaze, or maybe it was just the smell of bread and turkey, but I took it. That bite should have been forgettable. Just bread, mustard, cold meat. But instead it felt like some invisible hinge swinging open in my life. Because the thing about moments is, you never know which ones are doorways until you step through. What I didn't know was that I was stepping into her orbit. What I didn't know was that she was the kind of person who gave away food she couldn't spare, while hiding secrets she couldn't bear. And what I definitely didn't know was that months later, I'd be standing at her wedding, shaking the hand of a man whose fortune made headlines, but whose face had almost never been seen. Her father, a billionaire recluse with eyes like locked safes. The sandwich was the first clue. The station was the stage. But the real story? That would come later, when hunger turned into obsession, when kindness twisted into complication, and when the bride's veil lifted to reveal a family empire built on silence. And it all started because she gave me half. Half a sandwich, half a chance, half a truth. The other half, I had to fight to uncover. For weeks after that night, the memory of her lingered like a perfume I couldn't place. Not the sandwich itself, that was gone in 3 bites, but the gesture. It gnawed at me. Why would someone hand over food to a stranger at a train station? Why would she look at me as if she already knew me, when I was sure we'd never crossed paths before? I didn't even catch her name. Just her coat. Navy, a little too big for her shoulders, and the way she kept twisting the paper wrapper in her lap after she gave me the half. A nervous habit. A tell. Something about her wasn't ordinary. Life went on, as it always does, but not for me. My rent was overdue, my job search was circling the drain, and every day the city felt like it was shrinking, pressing me into corners I couldn't escape. I told myself she was just a random act of kindness. But at night, when the world was quiet, I caught myself replaying the scene like a broken reel. Her eyes, the torn sandwich, the silence that said more than words. Then came the second encounter. A crowded university library, weeks later. I was scribbling notes, half asleep over a stack of borrowed textbooks, when I saw her again. Same navy coat, same restless hands. Except this time she wasn't holding food, she was holding court. 3 classmates were gathered around her, hanging on her every word. She laughed, soft but commanding, and something clicked. She wasn't just generous. She was magnetic. People bent toward her like plants to sunlight. When she finally noticed me staring, there was a flicker of recognition. Her lips parted, as if she were about to speak, but then she didn't. She just smiled, that unreadable smile, the kind that says I know something you don't. That was the night I learned her name. The night curiosity began to sink its hooks. The night I realized half a sandwich had tied me to a story I wasn't prepared to follow. And if I'd walked away then, maybe things would have stayed simple. But I didn't. I leaned in. Because something told me she wasn't just a stranger anymore. She was a key. Her name was Clara. Simple, elegant, like a note held too long on a violin. But attached to it was a silence, the kind that made me wonder why nobody seemed to ask more questions about her. The first rule of being around Clara, I would soon learn, was this: don't ask where she's from. People tiptoed around it. Professors praised her brilliance. Classmates orbited her charm. But when the conversation steered toward family or background, Clara would slide the topic away with a practiced grace, like someone who had rehearsed escape routes for every sentence. The second rule: she gave, but never took. Sandwiches, notes, time, attention. Clara poured herself into others, but whenever you tried to return the gesture, she deflected. I'm fine. Don't worry about me. You need this more than I do. It was like she was determined to keep the scales tipped, forever indebted to no one. And the third rule, the hardest one: if you tried to get too close, she'd vanish. Not dramatically, not with slammed doors or tears, but with a quiet retreat. One day she'd sit beside you in the library, tracing words in your notebook as if they were secrets. The next day, she'd be gone. No reply to texts. No sighting on campus. Just absence, stretching long enough to make you wonder if you imagined her. I didn't know these rules at first. I learned them by breaking them. By pushing. By asking why she gave half a sandwich to a stranger when she clearly hadn't eaten herself. By offering to buy her a coffee, only to watch her stiffen and decline. By walking beside her one night and noticing how her pace quickened whenever the topic edged toward home. Every rule I broke pulled me deeper. Every silence dared me to fill it. And then came the biggest rule of all, the unspoken one. If you're going to be part of Clara's life, you have to accept the shadows that come with her. I thought I could handle it. I thought I was strong enough. But shadows don't stay still. They grow. Once I understood Clara's rules, or thought I did, I started to test them. Not recklessly, not all at once, but in small, careful nudges. I'd show up early to the library, just to see if she'd pick the same seat. I'd mention offhand things about my own family, my own failures, hoping she'd offer something back. Sometimes she did. Little crumbs. A mention of a childhood near the sea. A slip about moving too often to count. A stray phrase my father wouldn't understand. That made me pause mid-sentence. But every crumb led to more questions, never answers. It was like trying to piece together a puzzle without the box cover. You have fragments, colors, edges, but no picture. And every time you think you see an image forming, another piece doesn't fit. One night, as the last train rattled through the city, she walked me to the station. Just like the first night we met. Only this time, she was restless, scanning the shadows as if someone might be watching. "Clara," I asked, "who are you hiding from?" She froze. For a split second, I thought she'd bolt. Instead, she gave me this almost imperceptible smile, the kind that feels like a dare, and whispered, "Not everyone who disappears wants to be found." Then she was gone, swallowed by the dark, leaving me with more silence than I could stand. That was puzzle 1. What was she hiding? Puzzle 2 came soon after. I got an envelope under my door. No name, no return address. Inside, a train ticket. Departure, the same station where we met. Destination, a town I'd never heard of, 3 hours north. No note, no instructions. Just a ticket and the faintest trace of perfume that reminded me of Clara's coat. I should have ignored it. Should have torn it up. But I didn't. Because by then, the hunger was back. Not for food this time, but for truth. So I boarded the train. And what I found at the end of the line wasn't Clara. It was a mansion on the cliffs. Iron gates. Windows like black eyes staring down at the sea. And a name etched into the stone that I recognized from headlines, not from real life. Her last name. The gates loomed over me like something out of a Gothic novel. The kind of place where secrets didn't just live, they thrived. Salt wind lashed my face, carrying the roar of the ocean below, but all I could hear was the thud of my own pulse. What was I doing here? Why had she led me, if it was even her, to this place? A butler in a black coat opened the gate before I could even touch the bell. He looked me over as if he'd been expecting me, and without a word, ushered me inside. The house swallowed me whole. Marble floors, chandeliers that flickered like trapped stars, corridors that seemed to stretch farther than reason allowed. And silence. Always silence, thick enough to choke on. I was led to a drawing room where a single portrait dominated the wall. A man in his 60s, silver hair, eyes cold and calculating. The caption beneath read a name I'd seen only in newspapers and whispered conversations. An industrialist, a titan of finance, a man who hadn't given an interview in over a decade. A man said to be worth billions. And the name matched hers. That was the first crack in the story. Clara wasn't just some wandering student, some mysterious stranger with a half sandwich. She was the daughter of him, a recluse so rich the world bent to his absence. The realization burned in my chest. Suddenly, everything made sense, and nothing did. The vanishing acts, the reluctance to accept help, the refusal to speak of her past. She wasn't protecting herself. She was protecting him. And then I saw her. Clara, standing in the doorway. No coat this time. Just a simple dress that seemed too fragile for a house this heavy with wealth. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, she didn't smile. "You shouldn't have come," she said. Her voice was low, steady, but her hands trembled at her sides. That was when I understood the real puzzle. It wasn't just who Clara was. It was what I had stepped into. Because if her father was the fortress, Clara was the gate. And I had just walked through it. From that night onward, everything shifted. Clara didn't vanish anymore. She couldn't. I knew too much. And yet, instead of answers, I found myself tangled in more questions, more contradictions, more locked doors inside her life. I tried to talk to her, to make her explain why she had hidden the truth, why she had dragged me, intentionally or not, into the orbit of her father's fortress. But Clara had a way of talking in circles, as if she were playing chess 3 moves ahead while I was still learning the rules. "I gave you half that sandwich," she said once, almost bitterly, "because I knew you wouldn't let it go." What did that mean? A test? A trap? A warning? Meanwhile, whispers of her father began to leak into my days. Stories from classmates, rumors of lawsuits, missing partners, offshore empires. Headlines I suddenly reread with fresh eyes, hunting for the face behind the fortune. The more I learned, the less human he seemed. A phantom pulling strings from his cliffside castle. And yet, Clara was tethered to him. Every attempt I made to pry her free, to ask why she stayed, what she feared, ended the same way. With her hand tightening around mine, her eyes sharp, her voice flat. "Don't." But the complications didn't stop at words. Invitations began appearing. Dinners at the mansion. Formal gatherings with men in suits who eyed me like I was an insect crawling across their silverware. Always, Clara sat beside me, composed but distant, her father's absence looming larger than his presence. It was at one of these dinners I heard it for the first time, her upcoming marriage. Whispers traded between guests, confirmed with a glance at Clara's ringless hand. An arrangement, someone muttered. Strategic. A merger of empires dressed in lace. I looked at Clara across the table, her face unreadable, and realized the truth. This wasn't a choice. This was a sentence. And I, foolish and hungry for meaning, had walked straight into the courtroom. The more I tried to fight it, the tighter the web pulled. I wasn't just an outsider anymore. I was a witness, and witnesses don't always walk away. The wedding was set in motion like a machine, dates whispered, arrangements drafted, dresses fitted in secret. Every time I tried to speak to Clara about it, she shut me down, sometimes with silence, sometimes with a sharpness that left me bleeding inside. But the truth is, it wasn't just her I was up against anymore. It was him. Her father finally appeared one evening, not at the head of a dinner table, but in the study, waiting for me. I'll never forget the way the air seemed to bend around him, as if even silence obeyed his command. He looked nothing like the frail recluse the papers imagined. No, he was formidable, steel-wrapped in tailored wool, eyes polished like obsidian. "You think you've discovered something," he said, his voice like gravel dragged across marble. "But all you've done is trespass." I tried to defend myself, to explain that Clara had pulled me into this, that I only wanted to understand her. But he cut me off with a raised hand. "You mistake hunger for loyalty, curiosity for courage. Do you really believe my daughter needs saving?" The words hit harder than any shout. Because in that moment, I saw Clara in him. The same sharp edges, the same refusal to let anyone in. Maybe she wasn't protecting herself. Maybe she was protecting me. But I couldn't let go. Not after everything. The confrontation reached its peak 2 nights before the wedding. I found Clara in the garden, away from the glittering guests and the suffocating mansion walls. The ocean crashed against the cliffs, wild and desperate, like my own heart. "Clara, don't do this," I begged. "Not for him, not for them. You don't owe anyone your life." For a moment, I thought she'd break. Her eyes glistened, her lips parted. But then she turned away, voice barely audible. "You don't understand. This isn't about me. It's about legacy." That word, legacy, hung between us like a blade. I realized then the scale of the fight I was in. This wasn't love versus marriage. This was me versus an empire, me versus a man who could buy and bury truth with a single stroke of a pen. And Clara was the battlefield. The day of the wedding felt unreal, like walking into someone else's dream. The mansion, already imposing, had been transformed into a cathedral of wealth. Arches of white roses, crystal chandeliers hung in tents, a string quartet playing to a crowd dressed in diamonds. And at the center of it all, Clara, veiled in white, a porcelain figure moving toward a future that wasn't hers. I stood in the back, an uninvited guest cloaked in shadows. I shouldn't have been there, but I couldn't stay away. Not when I knew this wasn't love. It was leverage. The ceremony began, words spilling like smoke into the heavy air. And then, at the crucial moment, when the priest asked if anyone objected, the silence pressed down like iron. No one moved. No one breathed. Except me. I stepped forward. My voice cracked, but it carried, "I object." Heads turned. Gasps rippled. For the first time, Clara's father looked rattled. His jaw clenched, his knuckles whitening on his cane. Clara froze, veil trembling in the draft of whispers. And then, in a voice steady as stone, she spoke. Not to me, not to the priest, but to her father. "This ends today." She lifted the veil. Her eyes locked on his, unblinking, defiant. "You built this empire on silence, on secrets, on trading me like a commodity. But I'm not your currency. I'm not your legacy." The room fractured. Some guests rose in shock, others in fury, but all I could see was Clara, finally standing in the open. Not vanishing, not deflecting, not obeying. Her father's face was a mask of fury and calculation, but even he couldn't stop what had already begun. Because legacies aren't just inherited, they can be broken. Clara dropped the bouquet, its petals scattering like torn contracts across the marble floor. She walked toward me, not running, not fleeing, but walking with a quiet power that silenced the room more effectively than any threat. When she reached me, she took my hand, fingers trembling but unyielding. And together, we turned our backs on the mansion, the guests, the man who had tried to script her future. The truth was out. The legacy was shattered. And all it had taken to start the unraveling was half a sandwich at a station. We never took the train back that night. Clara and I walked until the cliffs gave way to the road, until the mansion was nothing but a silhouette swallowed by distance. For the first time since I'd met her, she didn't seem like she was about to vanish. She was just present. Fragile, yes. Bruised by years of silence, yes. But finally free in a way that money could never counterfeit. The papers spun their own stories in the weeks that followed. Headlines screamed of scandal, of betrayal, of a daughter breaking ties with her father's empire. Some called her reckless. Others called her brave. To me, she was neither. She was simply Clara, the girl who gave half of what she had, even when it left her hungry. As for her father, he retreated deeper into his fortress of wealth. Perhaps plotting, perhaps nursing his pride. But his legacy was no longer absolute. His daughter had walked away, and in doing so, she had cracked the foundation of his myth. Life didn't suddenly become a fairy tale. There were struggles, nights filled with fear, mornings heavy with doubt. But through it all, Clara kept reminding me of something she'd once whispered at the station. Not everyone who disappears wants to be found. Now, though, she didn't disappear. She stayed. And together, we learned that sometimes survival isn't about vanishing into shadows. It's about daring to step into the light. Looking back, I realized the story could have ended 1,000 different ways. I could have ignored the sandwich. She could have ignored me. But she didn't. And that choice, small, quiet, ordinary, rippled outward until it shattered empires. So if there's anything to take from this, it's this. Don't underestimate the small beginnings. Don't dismiss the crumbs. Because sometimes the thing that saves you, or ruins you, doesn't arrive as a feast. It arrives as half a sandwich at a train station.